Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. So this is the second session in the Shade of the Quran series, and what we're doing is talking about the development of the Muslim and the Muslimah in light of the Quran. And so one part in this reflection has to do with the issue of understanding some concepts in Dawah, and we're using the book Dawah, the Lost Art of the Call of Islam. Uh, and by Sheikh Khalid Al Amin, and then we're using a reader, a Quranic reader, that introduces the chapters of the Quran according to the chapters of the Quran as they were revealed in Mecca and as they were revealed in Medina, and with a general concept or framework that these chapters of the Quran have been organized into what can be said to be the way that the Quran was revealed. So the way that this Quranic reader is organized is that each chapter of the Quran is as close as possible to the way that the Quran was revealed, so that we're kind of seeing the Quran coming down as not the Quran as is in the Mus'haf, but the Quran as is being revealed, and so that we're getting this understanding of how it is that the Quran is impacting, the community. You get the idea? Mm-hmm. So the Quran was revealed twice. One to a Lawh al-Mahfuz, and then one that was in that case it was revealed all at one time. But when it's revealed to human beings, it's revealed gradually. It's revealed gradually. The other thing is that the Quran, we have it in two ways. We have it the way that it was revealed gradually, and not according to the order that is in the Mus'haf. The Mus'haf is the written documentation of the Quran, the way that the Quran was collected and organized. That organization began to take place in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and there was writing. And the order of the ayat of the Quran is clearly understood to be a part of revelation. So we have a surah which is a chapter, and in that surah we have ayat, or what we call verses. This verse comes in this place, and this verse comes in that place, that concept. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. These verses of this chapter, they come in a specific place. That is without debate from Revelation. Now, as far as the order of this order, the chapters of the Quran in the Mus'haf itself, we have two opinions amongst the scholars. One that says that order of the chapters is part of revelation. What that means is that Allah guided the Prophet ﷺ to that order, right? And so that is not something that came from his personal effort or opinion. That gives us a different insight into the Quran than what we would get with the second opinion. Just like you have the concept of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's an order, and that order gives a certain type of organization. When you have the ayat of a particular chapter of the Quran, when they're organized in a certain way, that means the meaning is flowing from ayat 1, ayat 2, ayat 3, like that. There's an organization. Firstly, we talked about this before. A more holistic way to study the Quran, and is my preferred way, is that you read the surah as a whole, and then you look for how it is that the ayat relate to one another. Okay? So what we do, which is wrong, in my opinion, although it's allowable amongst many scholars, that we take the ayat. It could be, I should say it like this so that we're correct. There's a wrong way to do it and a right way to do it. when we cherry pick ayat out of the chapter that those ayat are in, and then we start giving them their meanings without thinking about what is the relationship of that ayat to the other ayat that come before and after, and how those ayat play a role in that surah itself, that's distortion. Because now it's just like we're picking and choosing. And then now the scholars, they have taken the approach that they look at the Quran ayat by ayat. And at times that creates a problem, because then they forget that it comes in the context. But the scholars, you know, we have a more principled approach as to what they're doing, right? So they have more tools to kind of come to a conclusion, and is a more accurate conclusion when they're trying to understand the Quran, versus an average person just taking the ayat and just giving it whatever meaning they want, right? So to clarify or make simple the idea, we clearly say that the ayat that are in the surah, that's from Allah, is the one that ordained that. Allah is the one who ordered that order, that organization within that surah. So just like, for instance, when we say that, for instance, that one ayat comes first, then another ayat comes second, another ayat comes third, and each one is giving us meaning, and those meanings are related to each other. Just like we say that organization is going to give us a certain set of meanings, because what happens when we study the Quran and we study the surah as a whole, that means that we're going to find themes in that surah. That's why if you take the ayat out, you kind of mess with the theme. You see what I'm saying? Because you can miss the point. So, but when we have a chapter of the Quran, and each chapter we say that the verses, the ayat of it are organized in a certain way, we get this sense that, well, that chapter has a central meaning that's going to organize the different themes. It has a central theme. So that's what we want to understand. What is the central theme? Okay. All of that, what I said, all of that thinking, it necessarily wouldn't be possible if those ayat were not organized. So we have the same concept that we apply to the organizations of the chapters of the Quran, right? When they come in the Mus'haf, when they come in the preserved written book. We say that Surah Al-Fatiha coming first, and Surah Al-Nas coming last, Surah Al-Baqarah like that coming after Surah Al-Fatiha, that organization is intentional, is purposeful. There's a reason why it's organized that way. There's an interconnectedness between these chapters, right? And when we have these chapters grouped together, it gives us a whole meaning. So chapter 1 gives us one meaning, chapter 2 gives us another meaning, chapter 3 gives us another meaning. When we read these chapters in light of each other, then we get a central meaning. So then that becomes the way that we study the Quran. We're looking to see how it is that the meanings of the Quran are interrelated to each other, and what are the primary meanings, like what are the underlying meanings, right, going on there. That is easily achieved as a concept, is easy. In other words, it's easy to try to, with some work, of course, and study, it's easy to see that that's going on if we believe that the chapters of the Quran have been ordained by Allah. Because that means Allah wanted this here, Allah wanted that here, Allah wanted that there. You see what I'm saying? So there's purpose in that. But there's another opinion that says no, that the organization of the Mus'haf came from the Prophet and the companions, that they were the ones on their own that they did that. I don't go with that opinion, but it's there. You understand what I'm saying? So if that's the case, then the organization doesn't, it's just, it's not as interesting as far as this whole idea of looking at the Quran as a puzzle, right? But when we look at, if we say that the chapters were ordained by Allah, commanded by Allah to organize them the way they were, then it's like we're trying to uncover the puzzle. That there's a reason why Allah put this here and didn't put it there. The same thing with the chapter of the Quran inside the one chapter versus the concept of the Mus'haf as a whole, that each chapter in the Mus'haf has its proper place. When we look at one chapter, there's a puzzle going on as to why these ayat are organized the way that they are, and how do they relate to each other, right? How do these meanings relate to each other? So that's how the Quran is organized in the Mus'haf, right? And we said we go with the opinion. There's two opinions. We go with the opinion that the way that the chapters of the Quran are organized, that came from Allah. And we have evidence is stronger, in my opinion, than the evidence to say that it didn't come from Allah. Now, put the Mus'haf aside for a second. The way that the Quran was revealed to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was revealed gradually, not all at one time. And it was revealed, certain ayat were revealed in a specific context, specific situations, basically. Like these ayat were revealed in this particular situation, right? And so that gives us another layer of meaning. So when we study the Quran from that idea of how it was revealed, it gives us this sense of like kind of we're like living in that process of how the Sahaba, they were experiencing the Quran being revealed to them in their life situation. Now we have to realize that for 13 years, the Quran was revealed over 23 years, right? About 23 years. We have to realize for about 13 years, majority of those 13 years, like about 95%, there was no talk about halal and haram rules. No discussion at all. That's how the da'wah was. The focus was on the unseen. What we mean by the unseen is the hereafter, the existence of Allah Ta'ala, and the value of good deeds. And then that begins to become reward for goodness, for doing good, and character, having good character, and so on. That begins to change a little more as Quraysh, which was the leading tribe that existed in the Arabian Peninsula, as they opposed the Dawah. Then the Quran starts sending threats for those who don't believe. But in the initial stage of the Dawah, those who were considered not to believe, it wasn't the people of the book. The people of the book were considered as believing in God. They just had some issues at times that came up, whether in their actions or in their beliefs. But the mushrikeen, for the most part, were being defined as those people like from Quraysh that, they believe more in fabricated idols that were made by hand and stone or wood or whatever it was. And then they were opposing, at the same time, they were opposing the Dawah. But if you look in the early period of the Dawah, Najashi in Africa, King Najashi, he was considered a just leader. The Prophet ﷺ allowed and sent a group of the companions that were suffering a lot of persecution to go into Africa, to go to Habasha, to Ethiopia, to take refuge in that Christian place. There was not much mention that, they're disbelievers and that they were, right, known to be people of justice and people of some sort of a deen that was revealed. And Ja'far bin Abi Talib, when he goes there, he speaks to them like, what is the common ground between us? And that's how the Muslims, when they go into Africa, that's one of the first encounters, that their encounter with the people of the book, with the Christians specifically, is not one, you guys say that, you're a mushrikeen. It's not, it's where's the common ground? Then where's the differences? And we don't like to do that. You see what I'm saying? So that's why studying the Quran and studying the life of the Prophet ﷺ and what's going on in that time period is extremely important, because it's going to give us a different insight. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at the Quran from that perspective. We already, started to do some stuff in that regard, in which we would talk about Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Qalam. So for a few minutes, let's talk about the point of some other principles in Da'wah that will go to Surah Al-Hujurat. And we'll deviate from the way that it was revealed, the Quran was revealed, and go to Surah Al-Hujurat because of its importance in building us in our community. But Khalid, Sheikh Khalid, I mean, he said that da'wah is in reality social work. And he says that, he says in his analysis of 50 years, right, that he was saying that in his analysis of 50 years experience, right, that the effort of doing da'wah, it was it was an attempt to help human beings that was being undertaken. And then he said it was an attempt to help human beings heal from physical, mental, and spiritual illnesses. We've lost that concept of da'wah completely. You see what I'm saying? That's has been gone. Now da'wah becomes the issue of we're trying to convince somebody to be Muslim, and we don't care if they have, if they need to heal. And see, this is why we talked about the importance of the Quran, because when the Quran was being revealed, that's exactly what it was doing. It was addressing people and their struggles and their situations and their life, calamities and whatever challenges that were coming their way. It was not disengaged, disattached from their lives. That's why they didn't doubt in Islam. They had a sense that Islam is related to my life, and my meaning is valuable, is meaningful, is impactful, is effective.
So it was actually addressing people's problems when they were reading, like. Because
it's not that when they were reading, is that when the Quran was being revealed, it was being revealed in the context in Mecca where there was all kind of social problems. And Mecca at that time was an environment in which it would be equivalent to one of our worst neighborhoods. Killing, drugs. That was there.
It was relatable to the situation.
It was relatable to, yes, it was relatable to that context and that situation, and had the power to transform those people from those behaviors that were so problematic that were creating an issue in that community and for them as individuals, right? And things that it highlighted was like the value of the oppressed, the value of women, the value of human beings in general. That was something that was highlighted all the way from the beginning of the Dawah, meaning from the beginning of the revelation of the Quran. And we mentioned that before, especially if you say Surah Al-Alaq, there's differences amongst the scholars. But if you say that the chapter of the Qlat is the first chapter to be revealed, then the first thing that the Quran is talking about is our development, our creation, our development. That's important because, and we talked about this multiple times, that's important because what ends up being the case is that we feel like our lives are meaningful. The origin of our life. It's easier that when we start saying, well, I don't feel like my life has any meaning. It's easier to go against that idea. Because of course, sometimes in life we go through some hard challenges where we're like, we start questioning the value of ourselves and our lives and all that. Especially when people are hurt and everything comes along with that. But it's easier to deal with those types of things when you think about, but hold on a second. Like Allah created me. You see what I'm saying? Allah created me with a purpose, and that this life has meaning. And yes, this life is not perfect. It's like a journey, and then there's another world, and in that world there's perfection. That concept was the beginning concept that the first generation was being introduced to. Why? Because they were being introduced into the hereafter, El Masaya, right? And so it worked in a very interesting way because they believed in the hereafter. Then their deeds, they were like, well, for what they did, los hechos que están haciendo, it became an issue of what? Became an issue, well, if I do this, I'm going to get punished or I'm going to get rewarded in the hereafter, right? And so then also, right, it became an issue if so their deeds, and because of believing in the hereafter, their deeds in the here and now became what? Better. See what I'm saying? because of the issue that they were believing in the hereafter, because they believed in accountability, right? That we as human beings are accountable. That's clear. That's how Iman was being communicated to them. That their deeds have value, and that their deeds get reward, or they get punishment. And so then that becomes a situation in which now that in this world, people they want to change the way that they're dealing with each other. They want to change the way that they're dealing with life, right? Because they know that there's consequences in the hereafter, right? And they also want their station in the hereafter to be high. So belief in the hereafter is coming back and impacting the here and now, and the here and now is affirming what it is that they believe in the hereafter, because they're correcting themselves in their deeds. And it's not an issue of perfection, it's because human beings have issues. But it was an issue that they started striving for that. They started striving for that. So that's important. That idea that Dawah is social work. And he says that, in the analysis of like 50 years, so on and so forth, the effort of Dawah was to help human beings heal from physical, mental, and spiritual illnesses. And that's exactly what the Quran was on. It's not to debate about this point or that point. And we have to get also beyond, because we have the concept of la ikraha fi din, that there's no compulsion in din, meaning que no podemos forzar nadie a entrar en Islam. La gente tiene que coger ese camino. And we forget that. We forget that we can't force anybody to come into Islam. Right? And what happens, especially, we have to be careful in our community here, that when we have non-Muslims come in, if we see them without hijab, the first thing is not to talk about hijab. You know what I'm saying? Or it could be even a Muslim. We have to be careful. Like, we have to see where the person is at. But especially because there's cases where people have been confused for being Muslims without hijab, and it's a non-Muslim that's in our community visiting, and we're trying to force them on hijab, and they don't even know what your name is. You know what I'm saying? They don't know what your name is. They don't know why you're here. You're not made to feel welcome. And if you're already coming into an environment where you feel strange, and then somebody's telling you, put on this scarf. That's just as an example, right? They put on this scarf. Put on this scarf. They're like, hold on a second. You know what I'm saying? Like, put on this scarf. Like, but you're also violating my rights. Like, you're trying to impose your religion on me. And we don't realize that, in society, that's a form of discrimination. In this society. You see what I'm saying? Where you're not letting the person be who they are. You're trying to force them to be how you want them to be. And then if not, then you kick them out. It's a form of discrimination. And so we have to be careful with that. But from the angle of Dawah, we have to be careful because we have to meet people where they're at and the situations that they're in. And we see all kinds of troubles, all kinds of situations. If someone is struggling with clinical depression, which means basically they may need medicine, and they're not praying, you don't go and insult them and say, well, your iman is weak in this. You're not in a position to judge what's going on in their hearts. You can encourage them to the goodness, but you have to understand why it is that they may not be praying. And you have some youth like that are completely struggling. They're completely checked out. You see what I'm saying? And it's not going to help us by trying to force them. We have to get to why it is that that's there. Especially if they grow up in a Muslim family and so on and so forth. Why is that there? But if we never try to answer that question, and we just do this. In their hearts, they don't want to do it anyway. So if they do it, they're going to be doing it by force. You see what I'm saying? And some people, they don't get that concept. But if we want the Dawah to be firm, is the issue more of bringing people in gradually and being careful, especially in that stage where the person may not be practicing or may not believe, not to force. Right? Not to force. Because it's like if I throw you into a pool that's 10 feet deep and you don't know how to swim, you're going to start drowning. You know what I'm saying? And then, or you're going to go through a traumatic experience and try to figure out how you could save yourself, and you may start taking other people out. And that's what happens when people become Muslim or they start practicing again. That sometimes they get so rigid, everybody around them is, well, you're not, you're not a believer like me, like that type of concept. Or why are you doing this? We know people like that. People that all their lives maybe they were not practicing, they start practicing, and then all of a sudden everybody has mistakes and they don't have any mistakes.
They're perfect.
Yeah, they're perfect. So that's important. That's important. So the idea of Iman overall that he brings up, he says that the core is belief in the oneness of Allah, belief in the angels, belief in the books, belief in the messengers, belief in the day, and we come to account of the day of judgment, and that Allah wa ta'ala has created everything with a limit. Everything has its identity, everything has its purpose. We call that qadr. And from there, he starts talking about that, we as people that are engaging in da'wah, we have to have some sort of relationship with that. And again, we're going to be struggling. We're going to be struggling, especially in today's time. We're going to be struggling. Conditions are not perfect at all. Of life, they're not perfect. And we're going to find ourselves in gray situations. We're going to find ourselves in situations where we're trying to pull people out as well. You see what I'm saying? And I'll never forget, like Hassan Abdul Latif. Hassan Abdul Latif is a Muslim brother who has a re-entry program. Re-entry program is a program for people when they've been incarcerated or they're in jail, right? And then they want to come out, and how to bring them back into society. Because, if you're in jail, there's a reason why you've been in jail, right? And so it could be violence, it could be drugs, it could be a number of different reasons. Or maybe you're innocent, but still you're impacted by the environment. So you need to learn how to come back into the society. So Hassan, he was locked up for like 30 years, like some long period of time. So he became, Hassan has one of the most successful re-entry programs in Colorado. It's like it's recognized even by the government. They have it's like on another level. But he wrote a book, and I was introduced to that book when I was in Ohio working with juveniles. I was a chaplain, Muslim chaplain in the juvenile facility. I don't think that we didn't have many Muslims at all, but we did have some Muslims. They're very limited number. But one of the Muslim brothers that was working in that type of work, he had given me the book, and it's called 7 Steps to Never Going Back. It's online. It's actually a good book in personal life transformation. Even though he wrote it for people that have been locked up, it's actually good for life, for people in general. I'm gonna tell you why, and this is why I mentioned this book. Hassan has some videos and he said, some people may not like this, but the way that I speak may not be the way that average Muslims speak to each other. I may curse, I may do this, I may do that, and people may look at me and say, why are you doing that? I say, you have to understand, if I come in and it's like, Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing? My name is Hassan Abdul Latif. And, how was your day? And how was your life? So somebody that's been in the street, mother effort, this, that, you know what I'm saying? I'll kill you, that type of approach. The language just doesn't match. It doesn't match. The psychology doesn't match. And I'm not saying that we're always dealing with those people, but the point here of the example, because it's an extreme example, is that Hassan was like, I had to give them a language that they understand with the principle to meet them where they're at, to pull them out of that so that they learn how to be that person that is not of that orientation. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so we have to I'm not telling people go curse or whatever, but I'm saying that, the reality is you have to know how to meet people where they're at. And sometimes that means that, we in situations or in environments that is not necessarily the best situation environment. That's why that's not for everybody. You see what I'm saying? That's not for everybody. I remember that when I was in Chicago, there was a brother from the Black Dawah Network, and one of the imams, Brother Salim, we were on O Block. O Block is considered like one of the most dangerous
blocks in Chicago. It's like a murder block, drug block. Like we're out there doing dawah in that whole traditional way, just
I want to know about that.
talking to the people.
Did y'all actually go in the communities and talk to these guys?
We were there. We were there, but see that's a different reality than going on Burger Lot.
Right.
We were where we were right in the middle of the crack spot. You know, we're right in the middle of the crack spot. We're in the middle where the cops are coming through. You know, we were, it was dangerous, even to the point where when I was talking to some representatives from the Nation of Islam, because you know the Nation of Islam, their headquarters is in Chicago, and so when we were talking about that work, one of the brothers was saying, "Yeah, that's not for everybody," but we were out there. We were out there, and that was because the brother from the Black Muslim Dawah, he came, and what we were doing is distributing Qurans and the life of Malcolm X, because Malcolm X went to that transformational phase, and people can relate. People can relate. So so the point being is that we have to find how we can relate in every situation. It's like sometimes I have to try to use Spanish to relate. You see what I'm saying? In our examples, in our language. Not only that, in the way that we dress. You know what I'm saying? In the way that we dress. You know, that's important as well. You know what I'm saying? And that's not easy.
It's not.
It's not easy because you're constantly switching. You're constantly switching. You know what I'm saying? You have to know how to relate to each. You can't just always come from one angle. You know what I'm saying? You can't just always have a throw, but you always can't come in, you know, jeans and a thing. You can't. Sometimes you have to come in the suit. Sometimes you have to come this way. Sometimes you have to come that way. Sometimes you have to dress simple. Sometimes you have to dress fly. You know, you have. You know,
like the fly one.
Yeah, it's a reality. I had a teacher. Who did that. I had a teacher who he would have like these really fly sports suit jackets with these awesome glasses, smooth haircut, and then sometimes he would come with the kufi and a white thobe. That's how he was. Sometimes he would come in a jogging suit. You know what I'm saying? That's how he was, and because of that issue of because if not, then Islam is strange. Then Islam is only this Middle Eastern identity that even the Middle Easterners here don't have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or this Desi identity, or you know, some identity which people can't relate to, and we have done that, right? Where that's different than meeting the people where that, you know, right? We have changed that.
I love to dress Desi one day.
But you know, the Americans are the only ones that do that.
Yeah.
The Americans are the only ones that will take on somebody else's culture and then and yes and flip it. It has its positives and its negatives. You know what I'm saying? But we ourselves, what that does for us, like for instance, that may work in the African American community in the hood. You see that in Philly. You see what I'm saying? In Philly.
I went to Philly. I went to one of the like the slavery museum, right? And then I was wearing like my turban and stuff like that. And there was like this black guy that he was looking at me like really weird. Like maybe he was thinking like I was like doing like appropriation of like culture or something like that. But probably he didn't understand that I was Muslim. I don't know. But he looked at me really weird, really strange.
Like, what is she doing?
Like, she's a white lady wearing like a turban. What? She thinks she is, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, you see that in Philly. You see that in Philly. That works, but that's not going to work in the Latino community. And the Latino community, if you become Muslim and you do something like that, they're not even going to tell you became Muslim. They're going to tell you became Arab. They'll tell you became this culture, that culture. They're not going to say that you're a Muslim. So every culture that necessarily doesn't work. You see what I'm saying? Just like, for instance, if you go to some of these European American communities, that's not going to work. In you try to go into the Bible Belt doing that. Maybe you may catch some of them, but some of them are going to, you know, they have a certain prejudice towards that. So that brings us to the point that, you know, we always, you know, have to look at that reality. And I always mentioned that the Quran was relating to the people and so on and so forth. But what's different here is that the message has to be, you know, one that is healing. You know what I'm saying? As far as what time do we have?
7:34.
Okay, so as far as
the Surah Al-Hujurat is concerned, because we said we were going to talk a little bit about the Dawah, principles in the Dawah, right? And so, even though we've always been mentioning about relating to the people, we're using a book called The Lost Art of Dawah. Sheikh Khalid Amin was talking about the Dawah being like social work and having that mindset of helping people, working with people to heal, and whether where their needs are. In other words, where their needs are. And so that needs from us to be compassionate, to be empathetic, and so on and so forth. And we said that we said that was the approach of the Quran earlier on, right? That the Quran came and it was dealing with people's situations and so on and so forth. And so let's talk a little bit about Surah Al-Hujurat. Surah Al-Hujurat is basically like small rooms. In other words, that's the easiest way to say it. And so we're talking about this surah. It was revealed in Medina. So the approach to the surah was revealed in Medina. So one of the characteristics of revelation as it takes place in Medina, right, versus Mecca, is that revelation that takes place in Medina, and when we say Medina, we mean after Hijrah, is that the Quran is dealing with the community. The Quran is dealing with community issues. It's not just dealing with principles and ideas and character and so on. And we see more of that in beliefs. We see more of that in Mecca. And majority of the Quran was revealed in Mecca. But when we start getting to Medina, we start seeing a change in the Quran. There's a focus on building the community. In Mecca is talking about the unseen. In Mecca is talking about the hereafter. In Mecca is talking about reward. In Mecca it begins to talk about the hellfire for your action and those who don't believe. You see what I'm saying? In Mecca is talking about the value of good deeds in the Muslim personality and so on. Then towards the end, you start kind of seeing stuff is addressed like with regard to the issue of salah and that type of thing. In Mecca is about good character, the unseen reward.
And why did it change when it gets to Medina?
Because in Medina now, the Quran has to reorient the people and organize them because they left as refugees. They were forced to leave out. And they left out due to religious persecution. They left from Mecca. So when they go to Medina, now how do we live as Muslims? You see what I'm saying? That's the start. That's the question that comes up. How are we going to be Muslims with each other? How are we going to have this community? Now we're not under persecution. We tried to live with the non-Muslims that were from Quraysh, but they persecuted us. Now we have the ability to be openly Muslims. We're not worried about persecution, but we have to organize ourselves as a community because now everything is gone. Because the same people that were persecuting us, they were our families. They were our tribes. They were our people. So my connection to those things is all broken. So now I'm dealing with this person from this tribe and he's dealing with me. We never really dealt with each other. You see what I'm saying? We're dealing with people that came from Mecca. They're dealing with people that came from Medina, that come from Medina. Two different culture orientations, even though they're Arabs. You see what I'm saying? You're dealing with some people like, that Bilal and Salman Farsi, they come from different cultures, period. In Medina, you're dealing now more with the people of the book directly. The people of the book in Mecca never really cared about the people that were not believing in Islam. They never engaged in sharing their deen for the most part. They left them the way that they were. And so now it's important to organize the community. So now it's important to organize the community. And so here what happens is that this surah is revealed closer to the last period of the Prophet's life in Medina.
toward the end, closer toward the end part. That's important to understand when it was revealed. In Mecca, was it revealed in the early part of Mecca, or was it revealed in the late part? Because if it's revealed, or was it revealed right before Hijrah, right before they had to make migration to Africa, and then the last migration to Medina? When the migration comes, when you start getting to the middle period, and to the last stages of Mecca, about 5 stages we can say, and that means that there was pure persecution at the last stages of Mecca. So at the last stages of Medina, the community is more organized, but they have the challenges coming from the people of the book, the non-Muslims, others from those communities that are trying to destabilize the Muslim community. So there's like war and everything that's taking place. So here we have we have that the 4th ayah of this chapter is said to have been revealed concerning Bani Tamim. And they were sent, they arrived in Medina, and they started calling the Prophet out loud, like, with rough language, that type, not necessarily bad words, but rough language, like not respectful. So, Surah Al-Hujurat, part of it is addressing that type of behavior, how to deal with the Prophet, how to have good character. Right? And it's dealing with the character which is necessary for us to be brothers and sisters. Right? That what is it that we need to have in place in order for us to actually learn how to be brothers and sisters? Because this is the other challenge of the dawah. The first challenge is, how do we deal with people when they're coming in? The second challenge is, how do we continue to deal with them once they come in and deal with each other? And so that we are able to organize ourselves and we're able to have community life. And then the same principles that we find in Surah Al-Hujurat regarding brotherhood and sisterhood, I guarantee you, are the same principles that we're going to be able to use in marriage life. Same principles. Because at the end of the day, husband and wife, they have to be friends or brothers and sisters before they can, at the same time, before they can go to the next level. You can't have enemies being husband and wife. You know what I'm saying? That's just not going to work, right? You see the idea? And so we just go over some of the subject matter. So that here, this first subject matter, like we said, is to teach us who we are as Muslims. To teach us who we are as Muslims. What is the character that represents Iman? What is the character that represents Iman? So in the first thing that is taught in Surah Al-Hujurat, and we have to come back to this because we're not going to have enough time, is that the first 5 ayat have to do with what? How it is that we should approach Allah and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is our relationship with Allah and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Dealing with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is the issue of the unseen. Dealing with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that case, it was dealing with this teacher that we can see, that's supposed to be the representative of Allah, that's teaching us. He's not claiming to be Allah. He's not claiming to be perfect, but he's claiming to be guided by Allah, which protects him, which that's what gives him a sense of perfection. But it's not because he in himself is perfect. It's because prophethood perfects his character, his behavior, and protects him, so on and so forth. In other words, we're still dealing with the human being. So that's an important concept. Then the instruction is given. It's interesting how this works out. So it's Al-Hujurat. That when it comes to information, when it comes to chisme and all that type of stuff, gossip, when it comes to news that you hear, when it comes to somebody telling you something that you read and we say this. I think this also can be applied even to social media. Not necessarily in what we read, but in how we're communicating with each other. Why? Because in social media, we're miscommunicating. Not only social media, texting, emails, everything that comes along with that. So the Quran here is telling us to verify what's being said from the source. So the first thing is, yes, to make sure that it's truthful, and then actually after that will be to understand it. But we can also get some principles for that when it comes to modern life. Like, we have to be careful that sometimes we're not saying things, not texting things, not emailing things, and it is exactly not how we wanted it to be said. You see what I'm saying? Because then it's going to get us into some trouble with each other. Or we receive information, a voicemail, a phone call, or whatever, and we just run with that information, you know what I'm saying, as it is. Or even somebody calls us, that is someone we love, they leave a voicemail, and the way that they're talking to us, it gives a certain message. Say, hold on a second, let's try to figure out what's going on here. Versus just immediately jumping, and that's what we do. You see what I'm saying? We immediately jump on the information or what we hear or what we heard or whatever, and then we attack. And we believe. So much stuff is said about other people, and we believe it. We don't get. It doesn't matter if the person has some sort of background. It doesn't automatically mean that what's being said about them is true. You have a whole system that accuses people that are prisoners, that have been prisoners or incarcerated, that if a crime is similar that happened in the area, and this person is in the area, they may automatically attach it to that person, even though in reality the person may not have done it, right? And so we're beginning to learn the importance of verifying information, right? That's the key. But it's not only, it is also teaching us not only to verify information, but be careful how we talk about groups. This is the beef that I have, the problem that I have with us sometimes as Muslims, the way we talk about other religions, the way we talk about people. This same problem comes up with ethnicity, racism, this, that. We end up talking about people in a very bad way. And that has become normal in the world. And it's very dangerous. Because, see, when you start to talk about people in a very bad way, groups, whoever they may be, when you start to talk about them in a very bad way, what you're doing is you're opening up the possibility for not respecting their humanity. It's one thing when you're talking about their behavior in an accurate way that you may not agree with their behavior, but that doesn't mean that all of their behavior is off.
Right.
So we have to identify exactly what is the problem. We can't just make the whole person a problem. We have to identify exactly what is the issue. And that's why I said, when we talk about male-female dynamics, marriage, that even goes into that. Sometimes we're not giving each other the benefit of the doubt when we communicate. We're automatically assuming we understood what the other person said. We're not verifying. The other issue is that we also may have, oh, he always does that. She always does that. That's how she is. That's how he is. So we begin to develop this way of thinking about the person that we don't even let them get out of what the box, so to speak. Out of the character that we've given them. You see what I'm saying? And sure, some people may not change, but we have, in other words, but we have to be careful that it's sensitive. It's not only with husband-wife dynamics, we do this with our children. You know what I'm saying? We do this with I just heard this recently, somebody was telling me about this, that the way that this young child was being spoken to, it was so destructive that even the child was crying. The mother, you know what I'm saying? The mother was talking about, talking to the child in language was just destroying the child. And so we do that, you know what I'm saying? Well, we don't realize that we categorize, we label, we hurt other people with the way we talk.
It's like I won't name them actually, but it's like they have, like, if you're not Egyptian or if you're not this, you're not that, because everybody have their little cliques. And if you just an American, oh well, you're not a part of that clique. You gotta find an American to be a part of that.
Yeah, every group somewhat does that. Every group somewhat does that. The thing that differentiates the Americans is that we're more individualistic. But we do it too. You know what I'm saying? We do it too
I mean, because
in
we're
our
trying
own
to
way.
relate. We're trying to.
We're caught in the middle.
Right. That's why the only
We
way.
don't fit here. We don't fit
We don't
there.
fit there.
No, but this was being done. If you think about pre-segregation, it was being done. If you think about the way the Native American tribes were dealt with, it was being done. If you think about all of the immigrant groups that have come through Ellis Island, it has been done. See what I'm saying? If you think about, Latinos and what happens when they come over the border and how they're treated. You know what I'm saying? It was being done recently to the Asians. You know what I'm saying? That's why I was saying it's dangerous. Because when you start to dehumanize people, you basically giving the green light to X them out. Either to knock them out to now this is another issue within the context of the Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost the idea of respecting each other's culture and tribes, but also understand that we belong to an ummah, and also having the understanding that we have rights and responsibilities to each other. There's no doubt about that. And so I want to just end with this principle. So then the other thing that comes up in Surah Al-Hujurat is the issue of sulh. And I had talked about this in the khutbah. And this is that when there's fighting or conflict that takes place between two groups, that we have an obligation of bringing about the best conditions in that conflict. And that's why I said this also applies to husband and wife. You know what I'm saying? When there's husband and wife fighting, we can use that principle. We should think about how can we bring about a better situation versus me versus you. You see what I'm saying? It's either I win or you win. You know what I'm saying? We have that, and when you do, even they have something called high conflict couples in counseling. High conflict couples is that couple which no matter what you do, you can't deal with them at all because they're just at each other's throats so much that there's no way to really intervene. And so then if you're charged or if you have the responsibility to support them or aid them, how can you make them work out their situation to bring about a better situation? You have to learn that. But here it's talking about groups of Muslims that are fighting each other, that we have the obligation to pause them and bring about better conditions. It's not just an issue of getting them to stop, it's about bettering the situation. That's important. Bettering the situation. And we say the same thing when it comes to couples. It's about bettering the situation. You know what I'm saying? And so that takes some thought. But the Quran is teaching us principles which are the core of a healthy community, healthy society. And of course we can say healthy family. So with that, inshallah, we'll end. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone that joined us online. So
if it's like a certain group that they are set in their ways, how can you better that situation? Like, because they've been like this for so long, and
right, and that's why.
But
that's a difficult situation. But really, in reality, if we talk about the true reality of Dawah, the prophets had to deal with their people like that. But when it comes to institution building and so on and so, sometimes you have to build new institutions. Sometimes you have to leave one environment and go to another environment. All of that is up for grabs. Sometimes in a marriage, it means divorce. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it means separation. Sometimes in a friendship, it means no more friendship. You know what I'm saying? You know, that Islam doesn't ask us to stay under conditions that are oppressive. You know, that could be with friends, that could be with parents, that could be across the board. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't necessarily. But it also, what we're doing a lot now is that we give up. When it doesn't go our way, we give up. We don't really try. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we don't know because when you start talking about the reality of the masjid in Dawah, it's supposed to be education, right? But sometimes what we're not learning in our communities is how to go to these issues, how to be in relationships, And when I'm talking about relationship, I'm talking about every kind of relationship, parent-child relationships, friendships, how to deal with our grandparents, how to deal with the generational conflict, how to be husband and wife. We're not learning that. It's not being taught anywhere.
Because of the fact that a lot of people, they come from broken homes, so they just don't. Before, people used to have like a more stable marriage and stuff like that. So then the kids would be like, yeah, I want to have, when I get married, I want to be just like my parents. They have like, they've been married for 35 years, and then they kind of like learn how to be in a relationship based on what they saw with their parents.
That wasn't always healthy either, though.
No,
Right.
but at least you have like some sort of like,
you have
like
stability.
a roadmap.
You have stability, and the community was like that.
Yeah, and then you have like an uncle and aunt and other people that you also looking at other mirrors, But right now, like when you come from a broken family and you don't have family members around, you're not really seeing
everybody dies off
or whatever.
But that's what we were talking about. That Americans, the culture is more individualism. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We have a different set of problems than the Palestinian community. We have even though you have Palestinian Americans, we have a different set of problems than the Desi community. Those people who are Americans born here. And then within the concept, and they don't come from overseas or have relatives that are from Muslim countries. Then you have people that may have been born here, but they're first generation immigrants, but they don't come from Muslim countries. You know what I'm saying? They may come from Mexico. They may come from some other country. You see what I'm saying? They have a certain set of problems. You know what I'm saying? That is different than other American groups. The same thing, like I said, with the Native Americans. You know what I'm saying? And the difference between, like for instance, within the African American Muslim community is not the same always as the issues that are in the African American Christian community or the African American, non-Christian, non-Muslim community. There's different challenges that are there. That's why we have to be careful in simplifying everything and just generalizing. We can have some generalizations, but with the realization that we have to be careful, right? But dealing with our problems, on these levels, like when you're talking about like the family stuff, it requires understanding how things, the history of the family, but not only the history of the family, there's also the history of society. Because if you don't understand what's going on in society, you'll think the problem is just you and the other person, and you won't realize that in reality what has happened is that you may have grown up in conditions that were created for you. You see what I'm saying? And you may not even understand how it is that you contribute to your own destruction. Is what I'm saying clear or not really? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll give you an example. We had, and I'll end with this, like we have MS-13 in some of the cities. We have MS-13, right? It's an El Salvadorian gang noted to be one of the most. It's noted. Jersey City, JC has it. There's other places. It's supposed to be one of the most violent gangs in the country. If you look at those youth before they used to come, they were all tatted out. It was very identifiable. They were very identifiable. They toned that down a lot.
Well, there's the one that used to have like the tears.
No, that's was the Love and Friends.
So if you look at them, you judge at face value, and you just stop and you just say these thugs, these killers, these this. But when you go into the history, what happened in El Salvador was that there was like a war going on there. And that gang is very much tied into what has happened in many of our cities. Why? Because as there was a war going on there in El Salvador, you had these immigrant youth from El Salvador that were on the West Coast, that they were exposed to heavy metal, to gang culture. They were sent back to El Salvador, where they were kicked out of the country for whatever reasons, whether immigration or violence or whatever. So they end up in a war-torn situation. Now, those children grow up in those conflict zones. They grew up in a war conflict zone with an American culture, with the North American culture, actually. South American culture or Central American. So then they go back over there and they become more and more violent. Now, at the same time, why was that taking place? Because of the drug industry. And that drug industry is what impacted these cities here. Alhamdulillah, a lot of this stuff has been cleaned up compared to what it was.
Yeah, like especially like the whole coke thing with Colombia, you know, bringing in like the coke.
Right, and so when you
my mom used to work in the she used to work in the airports in Colombia, and she was the one who used to like check the people. She was like DEA, whatever.
Yeah.
And she worked there for 7 years, and she had to quit because they put like a car bomb, you know, that was supposed to be for her, but she didn't.
Yeah, and these are the problems that when we look in our own lives, how we're raised, and what has happened. When we go into this history, we begin to understand ourselves, our community, our environment. Why do we have these types of problems that we have? You see what I'm saying?
And then on top of that, when we came here, she came running from over there from that situation, right. And she left me there because she couldn't tell anybody that she had a child. Otherwise, they were going to go after me and my family, right? So once I came here 5 years later, then she was like, you know, it was like a lot. There was like a lot of Colombians, and they were targeting Colombian people. So you know, she was like, you cannot hang out with Colombians. You cannot say that you're Colombian. You know, and it was really weird. Like, it was really weird because I was in school and then I couldn't really stay where I was from, and you know, I couldn't really have Colombian friends because my mom, she was paranoid. She's like, no, they're probably into drugs. Probably they're like exporting. If they have a lot of money, that means like they're part of like the cartel or whatever. Yeah. She was so paranoid. So.
And this affects us.
Yeah.
It's just like some of the families that their father was in a war veteran in Vietnam and heavily impacted in the war. And then they come, I know a family like that, a Muslim family actually. The father was in Vietnam and he was extremely paranoid and he had everything locked up and guns all over the place because he was a war vet. He was impacted by what happened in the war in Vietnam. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And he's living in this reality with that mindset. I think he passed away though, but with that mindset.
Yeah, and my mom was like that. She used to think like a cop. And even when I was a teenager, she used to treat me like I was like a delinquent. And I'm like, Mom, like, you know, like she was like very suspicious and everything.
Was scared.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and the same thing, you know, goes to, like, for instance, my grandmother was with depression, my mother's mother. So they would save everything. They would put a brick in the toilet bowl so that it can decrease the amount of water that before you have all this water saving stuff. They would, like, my grandmother at a certain time, she would shut off the lights, right, in the living room, and then she would save everything, a piece of tissue paper, whatever. See what I'm saying? You have other people that, for instance, the mother's bipolar, right, and the mother's bipolar, and that's how she lives, and so they learn how to live in that reality, and they think that everyone lives like that, but everyone doesn't live like that.
They don't live like I didn't like the way my grandmother used to talk. She used to talk like my little sister, like, she sounded like a slave, and she'd be like, oh yeah, I don't want you go, and we used to be like, no, that's how she talk because she's from the South. She's like, no, everybody in the South doesn't talk like that. Like we really had to be like, no, she's from the South. But her ways were like that. Like, she used to be like scared of this and be like, oh no, we don't have to do. You know, everything was like back to her time.
Right. And see these type, you know, and you have other people. You have other people that they come from extremely rich families, and those families live in a certain reality, and they don't know anything about other realities.
And that is absolutely
that was our only reality. She didn't understand any other way but that.
Right, and these are the things. Thinking like this is important, like when we're dealing with the people, to understand how it is that our relationships are the way that they are, why people struggle. Mm-hmm. Then we can start talking about the deen. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? But if we don't take time out to know the people, what they've been through, what's going on, we're talking about the deen, not knowing how to apply it. It's like one time there was a talk that was made, and we'll end here. There was a talk that was made, and the reality of the talk, right? The brother was talking to sisters about certain things about marriage, and all of the sisters were divorced.
What?
And he didn't know that they were all divorced. And he's talking about these things.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? To these sisters, and they were very specific family problems that were coming up. And so, but he didn't know. You see what I'm saying? He didn't know. And so that happens when we don't take the time out to really understand, to know. Yeah, when we don't take the time out to know, so that we're able to address. And the same thing when we give advice. We may be giving advice to a person like family problems or whatever it may be, and we may end up breaking them. We don't know. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be careful. It takes a lot of work from that angle, and the way that we speak and what words we use. It takes a lot of work to be able to reach the people in that way. And then we have to be careful. You know what I'm saying? We have to retrain. Some of us ourselves, we get used to only dealing with problems. So we have to realize, we have to change. You know what I'm saying? Some of us, we get used to everything is just like all our potential, everything is great. You can accomplish everything. You go to other countries, that mindset is not there. You know what I'm saying? There's no money to accomplish everything that you're talking about. You have to try to figure out how you're gonna make ends meet to survive.
Or just trying to get water.
Yeah.
How are you gonna get from one place to the other? Get water for the whole town. That's your mission for the whole day.
Yeah.
And then once you get it, you're like a superhero.
And so that those psychologies, that way of thinking, that way of being, it depends on what the context of the situation is, and so on and so forth, right? And so that's what we want. We want to take from those principles of the Quran. Yes, we want to understand what the Quran is saying on its own terms and how it applies, and what it is that the Quran is directing to. But we also want to see, can we apply it in other situations like this? Like we're saying, Surah Al-Hujurat, can we apply it to family life? You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of principles that overlap between community life and family life. With that, we end. Assalamu alaikum.